The year is 2018. We're in a quiet suburban neighborhood where every lawn is perfectly mowed. Every house looks like it's been plucked from a catalog, and where secrets fester behind every white picket fence. Our story begins in the Parker family home. Modest but cozy, with walls decorated by family photos that tell a story of happiness, or at least the illusion of it. Meet Sarah and Ethan Parker, a couple married for 12 years. At first glance, they seem like your typical middle-class duo. Sarah, a freelance graphic designer, works from home, managing projects between school drop-offs and soccer practices. Ethan, on the other hand, is a financial advisor with a knack for closing deals and staying late at the office. They've got 2 kids. 10-year-old Maddie, who's obsessed with soccer and always has her nose in a mystery novel, and 7-year-old Jake, who loves dinosaurs and Legos more than anything. But the Parker family isn't as picture-perfect as it seems. Over the past year, cracks in their marriage have started to show. Sarah feels neglected, often venting to her sister about Ethan's long hours at work and how he always seems glued to his phone, even during family dinners. Ethan brushes it off, claiming he's under pressure at the office, working hard to secure their future. She just doesn't understand the stress I'm under. Ethan confesses one night to his best friend, Mike, over beers. I'm doing this for the family, but all I hear is complaints. She probably just wants more time with you, man, Mike replies. Don't take her for granted. Women notice that stuff. The tension isn't entirely one-sided. Sarah's frustration bubbles over one morning when Ethan leaves for work without saying goodbye. She texts him mid-morning, "You forgot something." His reply is curt, "What? Your family." Ouch. But the message doesn't land the way Sarah hopes. Instead of sparking a heart-to-heart, it deepens the rift. Ethan becomes more distant, staying later at the office and blaming back-to-back client meetings. By mid-March, the distance between them feels more like a canyon. Even Maddie notices, asking Sarah one night, "Mom, are you and Dad mad at each other?" "No, sweetie," Sarah replies, her voice tinged with guilt. "Sometimes grown-ups just get busy, that's all." But busy doesn't explain why Ethan's phone buzzes constantly, or why he's so secretive about who's texting him at all hours. And it definitely doesn't explain why he's been leaving the house early on Saturday mornings, a time he used to reserve for pancake breakfasts with the kids. One Saturday morning, curiosity gets the better of Sarah. While Ethan showers, she picks up his phone, trying to unlock it. 3 failed attempts later, she sets it down, her hands trembling. What was she even expecting to find? Ethan walks out of the bathroom, towel around his waist. "Looking for something?" he asks casually, his eyes flicking toward the phone on the nightstand. Sarah feels the heat rise to her face. "No, just wanted to check if Maddie's coach texted you." Ethan smirks, an expression that makes Sarah's stomach twist. "I'll let you know if he does," he says, grabbing his phone and pocketing it. Later that week, Sarah calls her sister, Liz, to vent. "I don't know, Liz. He's being weird, distant, and his phone is like Fort Knox. He's hiding something. I can feel it." "Have you asked him directly?" Liz suggests. "Yeah, and he just brushes me off," Sarah replies. "He says I'm paranoid. Maybe you should stop waiting for answers and start looking for them," Liz says, her tone serious. It's a suggestion that lingers in Sarah's mind longer than it should. Meanwhile, Ethan's life is taking a different turn. At work, he's developed a rapport with Olivia, the new marketing consultant. Olivia is everything Ethan feels like Sarah isn't these days. Fun, carefree, and most importantly, interested in him. She's always quick to compliment his work and has a knack for making him laugh. Their conversations start innocently enough, just casual chats by the coffee machine. But over time, those chats stretch longer, turning into lunches, and eventually into drinks after work. Olivia listens to Ethan's frustrations about his marriage with a sympathy that feels intoxicating. "It's like we're roommates," Ethan confides during one of their after-work meetups. "She doesn't see me anymore, you know? Not like you do." Olivia places a hand on his arm. "You deserve to feel appreciated, Ethan." Back at home, Sarah grows more suspicious. Ethan's behavior has shifted too noticeably to ignore. He's working late more often, and when he does come home, he's glued to his phone. One evening, as Ethan snores beside her, Sarah makes her move. She grabs his phone only to find it locked again. But this time, she's prepared. Earlier, she had casually watched him enter the passcode. The phone unlocks. Sarah's heart races as she scrolls through his messages. Most of them are mundane clients, colleagues, even their group chat with Maddie's soccer team. But then she sees one thread marked with a single heart emoji. No name, just the emoji. Her pulse quickens as she opens the thread. The messages are friendly at first, then flirty, and then unmistakably inappropriate. Her stomach churns as she reads Ethan's words, sweet nothings he hasn't said to her in years, and Olivia's replies, eager, encouraging, seductive. Sarah drops the phone, her breath catching in her throat. She stares at Ethan, still sound asleep, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing beside him. The next morning, Sarah's demeanor shifts. She doesn't confront Ethan right away. Instead, she starts observing him more closely, looking for signs she might have missed before. She notices how his mood lightens when a message pops up on his phone, how he showers more frequently before heading out, and how he suddenly started wearing cologne again. It all adds up to one undeniable conclusion. Ethan is having an affair. But Sarah isn't ready to explode just yet. She wants proof. Real, irrefutable evidence. She enlists Liz's help, and together they hatch a plan to follow Ethan the next time he claims to be working late. And that's where we'll leave things for now. The stage is set and the pieces are in motion. What will Sarah discover, and how will she confront Ethan? Let's pick up where we left off. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal as she plotted her next move. Liz, ever the problem solver, had suggested something bold: follow Ethan. It was risky, but Sarah was beyond worrying about subtlety. She needed to know the full truth, even if it shattered her. The opportunity came quicker than expected. On a Tuesday evening, Ethan casually mentioned he'd be working late again. Big client presentation tomorrow, he said, kissing Maddie on the head before grabbing his briefcase. Don't wait up. Sarah, playing along, smiled and wished him luck. But as soon as his car disappeared down the street, she grabbed her phone and texted Liz, "It's happening. Meet me in 10. They followed Ethan's black sedan in Liz's old Toyota, keeping a safe distance. Sarah's heart pounded as they drove through the city, heading away from his office and toward a quieter part of town. The streets became unfamiliar, lined with trendy cafes and boutique hotels. Definitely not the kind of area Ethan's firm operated in. Finally, Ethan's car turned into the parking lot of a small restaurant. Sarah recognized the place immediately. It was one of those dimly lit, romantic spots they'd celebrated anniversaries at years ago. The kind of place that promised quiet corners and expensive wine. Liz parked across the street. "Now what?" she asked. Sarah's voice was steadier than she expected. "We wait." They didn't wait long. Less than 5 minutes later, a figure appeared, Olivia. She was dressed to impress, her sleek black dress hugging her figure in a way that screamed confidence. She walked toward the restaurant entrance, glancing over her shoulder as if checking for prying eyes. Sarah felt like she couldn't breathe. "That's her," she whispered, gripping the edge of the dashboard. Liz leaned closer to the window, squinting. "Isn't that the coworker you mentioned? The marketing consultant?" Sarah nodded, her throat tight. "That's Olivia." The door to the restaurant opened, and there he was, Ethan. He stepped out, smiling in a way Sarah hadn't seen in years, and greeted Olivia with a hug that lingered just a little too long. The two of them disappeared inside, leaving Sarah staring after them, frozen. An hour later, Sarah sat in Liz's kitchen, replaying the scene in her mind. Liz poured her another glass of wine. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know," Sarah admitted, staring at the table. "I don't even know where to start. Do I confront him? Do I wait? What if he lies?" Liz leaned against the counter, her voice firm. "You've got proof now. That's step one. But Sarah, you can't let this drag on. It's only going to eat away at you." She was right, of course. The truth was out there, and there was no going back. But Sarah wasn't ready for confrontation. Not yet. Instead, she began her own quiet investigation. Over the next few days, Sarah combed through Ethan's digital life. She scoured his emails, checked his browser history, and even tracked his credit card statements. What she found was worse than she'd imagined. There were receipts for gifts, expensive ones, none of which she'd ever seen. Jewelry, hotel reservations, and dinners at upscale restaurants painted a clear picture. Ethan wasn't just cheating, he was living a double life. Each discovery felt like a stab to the heart, but Sarah kept going. She needed to be prepared for whatever came next. At home, the tension between them was palpable. Ethan, oblivious to Sarah's newfound knowledge, carried on as if everything was normal. He laughed at Jake's dinosaur impressions, helped Maddie with her math homework, and even suggested a family movie night. But to Sarah, it all felt hollow. Every smile, every joke. It was all a facade, masking the betrayal underneath. One night, after putting the kids to bed, Ethan found Sarah sitting at the kitchen table, her laptop open. "You've been working a lot lately," he said casually, pouring himself a glass of water. "Everything okay?" Sarah looked up at him, her expression unreadable. "Just a big project," she replied. "You know how it is." "Yeah," Ethan said, sipping his water. "Long hours, right?" The irony of his words wasn't lost on her. "Something like that," she said, her tone colder than she intended. If Ethan noticed, he didn't show it. As the days went on, Sarah's resolve grew. She wasn't going to sit idly by while Ethan continued to deceive her and their family. But before she could act, something unexpected happened. One evening, while Sarah was helping Maddie with her homework, Ethan's phone buzzed on the counter. He was upstairs with Jake, and for once he hadn't taken it with him. Sarah's pulse quickened. The screen lit up with a message. "Can't wait for tomorrow. Red heart O." Without thinking, Sarah picked up the phone and opened the thread. The messages were damning. Ethan and Olivia had been planning a weekend getaway, complete with reservations at a luxury resort. The final straw was a photo Olivia had sent. A selfie in front of a mirror, wearing nothing but lingerie. Sarah felt her stomach turn. She'd seen enough. That night, after the kids were asleep, Sarah confronted Ethan. "We need to talk," she said, her voice steady. Ethan, sitting on the couch with his laptop, looked up, surprised. "Sure. What's up?" Sarah placed his phone on the coffee table, the incriminating messages still open. "Explain this." Ethan's face drained of color. He stared at the screen, then at Sarah, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. It's not what it looks like." "Don't insult me," Sarah snapped. "I've seen the messages. I know about the dinners, the gifts, the hotel reservations." "How long, Ethan?" He didn't answer, his silence speaking volumes. "How long?" Sarah repeated, her voice breaking. Ethan finally looked away. 6 months, he admitted quietly. And with that, the fragile world Sarah had been clinging to came crashing down. That's it for now. If you're hooked, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to Story Corner so you don't miss what happens next. The confrontation is far from over, and trust me, it only gets messier from here. The air was thick with tension after Sarah confronted Ethan. For the first time in months, he was forced to face his betrayal, and there was no charming his way out of it. "So that's it?" Sarah asked, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. 6 months of lies, sneaking around, and you just admit it like it's nothing? Ethan rubbed his temples, refusing to meet her eyes. "I made a mistake, Sarah. I've been under so much pressure, and Olivia, she was just a distraction." Sarah's laugh was sharp and bitter. "A distraction? You call spending thousands on hotels, gifts, and dinners a distraction? While I'm here holding our family together." "I didn't mean for it to go this far," Ethan said weakly, but the excuse sounded hollow even to him. Their argument stretched late into the night, with accusations flying and years of buried resentment bubbling to the surface. Sarah didn't hold back, letting out everything she'd been bottling up for months. How she felt invisible, How Ethan's priorities had shifted from their family to his phone. How she'd spent nights wondering if she was crazy for suspecting something, only to realize her instincts were right all along. Ethan, cornered, could only repeat his hollow apologies. But Sarah wasn't interested in hearing them. For her, it wasn't just about the affair. It was about the lies, the betrayal of trust, and the way he'd made her feel small and unimportant. By the time Ethan finally fell silent, it was clear that the cracks in their marriage had widened into a chasm, one that neither of them knew how to bridge. The next morning, Ethan moved into the guest room. His things were hastily packed into a single suitcase, and for the first time, the house felt like it was divided in two. The kids noticed the tension but didn't understand the full extent of what was happening. "Why isn't Dad eating breakfast with us?" Maddie asked. "He has some work to catch up on," Sarah lied, forcing a smile. But Maddie wasn't convinced, and neither was Jake, who clung to Sarah's leg as she prepared their lunches. Ethan, meanwhile, avoided the kitchen entirely. He left early for work, muttering a vague excuse about meetings, though Sarah knew exactly where he was going. That afternoon, Sarah made a decision. She called Liz and laid out her plan. "I'm not going to sit here and let him walk all over me," she said. "I need to know exactly what I'm up against." Liz didn't hesitate. "What do you need?" "Proof," Sarah replied. "I want every detail. Every lie he's told. Every cent he's spent on her. If he thinks he's getting away with this, he's in for a rude awakening." Liz suggested hiring a private investigator, someone who could dig into Ethan's activities without raising suspicion. Though Sarah hesitated at first, worrying about the cost and the implications, she ultimately agreed. If she was going to confront Ethan properly, she needed hard evidence. Days turned into weeks, and the investigators' findings painted a grim picture. Ethan had been seeing Olivia regularly, often using business trips as cover. There were photos of them together at fancy restaurants, walking hand in hand down city streets, and even sneaking into a boutique hotel late at night. But the most damning evidence came in the form of financial records. Ethan had been siphoning money from their joint savings account to fund his double life. Thousands of dollars had been spent on gifts, trips, and extravagant dinners. Money that should have gone toward their mortgage, their kids' school fees, or their family vacations. Sarah's fury grew with every revelation. This wasn't just about betrayal. It was about the complete disregard Ethan had shown for their family. He wasn't just cheating on her, he was cheating their children out of a secure future. The breaking point came one Friday evening when Ethan came home smelling of perfume. Sarah was in the living room, waiting for him with the investigator's file spread out on the coffee table. "Had a nice time?" she asked, her tone deceptively calm. Ethan froze in the doorway, his smile fading. "What are you talking about?" Sarah gestured to the file. I know everything, Ethan. The hotels, the dinners, the jewelry. Every lie you've told me, every dollar you've stolen from this family. It's all here." Ethan's face turned ashen. He stepped forward, reaching for the file, but Sarah snatched it away. "Don't even think about it. I can explain," he started. But Sarah cut him off. "No, you can't," she said, her voice trembling with anger. "You've done enough explaining, enough lying, enough everything. I'm done, Ethan. I'm done." The next few days were a blur of legal consultations and tense conversations. Sarah made it clear that she wanted a divorce, and Ethan, realizing he had no leg to stand on, reluctantly agreed. But the battle was far from over. They still had to figure out custody arrangements, divide their assets, and decide what to tell the kids. Maddie and Jake took the news hard. Maddie, always perceptive, burst into tears when Sarah sat her down to explain. "Is it because of us?" she asked, her voice shaking. "No, sweetheart," Sarah said, pulling her daughter into a hug. "This isn't your fault. It's just, sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes are too big to fix." Jake, too young to fully understand, clung to Sarah and asked repeatedly if his dad was coming back. "He'll still see you," Sarah promised, though the words felt hollow. "He'll always be your dad." As the divorce proceedings began, Ethan's true character came to light. He fought Sarah on every point, from custody to finances, trying to claw back some sense of control. But Sarah, armed with the investigator's evidence, held firm. "You don't get to play the victim here," she told him during one particularly heated mediation session. "You made your choices. Now you get to live with the consequences." Ethan's lawyer tried to paint him as a devoted father, arguing that his affair didn't diminish his love for his children. But Sarah's attorney countered with evidence of Ethan's neglect: missed soccer games, forgotten school events, and a clear pattern of prioritizing Olivia over his family. In the end, the judge sided with Sarah. She was granted full custody of Maddie and Jake, with Ethan receiving limited visitation rights. The court also ordered him to pay child support, though the amount was a far cry from the money he'd squandered on his affair. For Sarah, the outcome was bittersweet. She had won the legal battle, but the emotional scars ran deep. Her marriage was over, her family forever changed. But as she looked at her children, Maddie reading in the corner, Jake building a Lego tower, she realized they were stronger than she'd given them credit for. "We're going to be okay," she told them one evening, as they sat around the dinner table. "It's just us now, but we're still a family, and we're going to be okay." And that's where we'll pause for now. The story isn't over yet. There's still so much more to unravel. If you're hooked, hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Story Corner for the next chapter. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming. With the divorce finalized and custody settled, you might think the drama would end there. But oh no, this story is just getting started. Sarah thought she'd hit rock bottom during her marriage, but she soon realized that the aftermath could be just as messy, if not more. Ethan wasn't taking the fallout well. Losing custody of Maddie and Jake hit him harder than he'd anticipated. He started to show up at the house unannounced, claiming he wanted to see the kids. But Sarah wasn't fooled. His real motive was to needle her, to try and claw back some semblance of control. "You can't just show up whenever you feel like it," Sarah told him one afternoon, blocking the doorway as Ethan loomed over her. "We have a schedule for a reason. They're my kids too," Ethan snapped, his frustration spilling over. "You can't keep them from me." "I'm not keeping them from you," Sarah shot back. "But you don't get to waltz in here and disrupt their lives whenever it suits you. You lost that right when you chose her." The argument escalated, their voices carrying through the house. Maddie appeared at the top of the stairs, her face pale. "Are you guys fighting again?" she asked timidly. Ethan immediately softened, his anger replaced by guilt. "No, sweetheart," he said, forcing a smile. "Daddy just wanted to say hi." But Maddie wasn't convinced. She glanced at Sarah, who gave her a reassuring nod. "Go back to your room, Maddie. I'll take care of this." Once Maddie was out of earshot, Sarah turned back to Ethan, her voice cold. "If you care about them at all, you'll stop this. They've been through enough." Ethan hesitated, his jaw tightening, before finally retreating. But Sarah knew this wouldn't be the last time he tried to push boundaries. Meanwhile, Olivia's presence in Ethan's life began to wane. What had started as an exhilarating affair quickly soured under the weight of real-life consequences. Ethan was no longer the confident, charismatic man Olivia had fallen for. He was bitter, distracted, and increasingly desperate. "You're not the man I thought you were," Olivia told him during one of their rare nights out. "I didn't sign up for this." Ethan, nursing his third drink, looked at her with weary eyes. "What did you expect? My whole life is falling apart." "That's not my problem," Olivia said bluntly, grabbing her purse. "Maybe you should figure your stuff out before dragging someone else into your mess." And just like that, she walked out of his life, leaving Ethan alone at the bar. For Sarah, the weeks following the divorce were a whirlwind of adjustment. She threw herself into her work, determined to rebuild her life for the sake of her kids. But no matter how hard she tried to move on, Ethan's shadow loomed large. One evening, as Sarah was tucking Jake into bed, her phone buzzed with a message. It was from an unknown number. "You're going to regret this." Her heart skipped a beat. She quickly blocked the number, but the unease lingered. She couldn't shake the feeling that Ethan was behind it. The next day, Sarah found her car keyed in the driveway. A deep scratch ran along the side, marring the paintwork. She filed a police report, but there was little they could do without evidence. "It's him," she told Liz over the phone that evening. "I know it's him." "You need to be careful," Liz warned. "If he's willing to do that, who knows what else he's capable of?" The tension reached a boiling point when Sarah received an anonymous email containing photos of her and the kids. They were candid shots taken without her knowledge, at the park, walking to school, even in their own backyard. Sarah's blood ran cold. She forwarded the email to the police, but their response was frustratingly vague. "We'll look into it," they said, but it didn't feel like enough. That night, she installed security cameras around the house, every creak of the floorboards setting her on edge. Maddie and Jake picked up on her anxiety, their once lively home now filled with a heavy silence. Ethan's downward spiral continued. He started drinking more heavily, his anger at Sarah festering into something darker. He blamed her for everything, for the divorce, for losing custody, for Olivia walking away. In his mind, she was the villain of the story, and he was the wronged hero. One night, fueled by alcohol and resentment, Ethan showed up at Sarah's house. It was past midnight, and the kids were fast asleep. Sarah, hearing the banging on the door, grabbed her phone and dialed 911 before cautiously peering through the peephole. "Sarah, open the door," Ethan shouted, his voice slurred. "We need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about, Ethan," Sarah called back, her voice shaking. "You need to leave." But Ethan didn't budge. He pounded on the door, yelling obscenities and threatening to take the kids. Sarah stayed on the line with the operator, her heart racing as she described the situation. When the police arrived, they found Ethan sitting on the front porch, his head in his hands. He didn't resist as they escorted him away, but the damage was done. Maddie and Jake, woken by the commotion, found Sarah in the living room, trembling. "Is Daddy in trouble?" Jake asked, his small voice breaking Sarah's heart. "He just needs some time to cool off," Sarah said, pulling them both into a hug. "Everything's going to be okay." But everything wasn't okay. The incident marked a turning point, not just for Sarah, but for the entire family. Ethan was issued a restraining order, barring him from coming within 500 feet of the house. It was a small comfort, but it didn't erase the fear that lingered in the back of Sarah's mind. Despite everything, Sarah was determined not to let Ethan's actions define her. She focused on creating a safe, stable environment for Maddie and Jake, surrounding them with love and support. Slowly but surely, the pieces of their lives began to fall back into place. And that's where we'll leave things for now. The climax is just around the corner, and trust me, it's going to be explosive. If you're invested in this journey, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. We've been building up to something huge, and trust me, the tension is about to hit its peak. If you're just joining us, make sure to hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay tuned for the explosive conclusion to this story. Things are about to get real. The restraining order had been a wake-up call for Ethan, but it wasn't enough to stop him. Sarah knew it, and her fear only grew as she realized that her ex-husband was unraveling. But what she didn't expect was for things to take an even darker turn. It was a Saturday afternoon when the first warning sign came. Sarah was in the backyard, watching Maddie and Jake play in the sprinklers, enjoying a rare moment of peace. The sun was shining, the neighborhood was quiet, and for the first time in weeks, Sarah felt a sense of normalcy. But that calm was shattered when her phone buzzed. The number on the screen was familiar, Ethan's. With a sinking feeling, Sarah answered. "Sarah." Ethan's voice came through, low and strained. "We need to talk." "Ethan, I told you," Sarah started, her heart racing. "We've talked enough. You're not welcome here." "I know I've messed up," he continued, his voice cracking, "but I'm asking for one chance to make things right. You owe me that much." The audacity in his words made Sarah's blood run cold. She stood up, her eyes scanning the yard for any sign of danger. "You've had your chance, Ethan. Don't ever call me again." She hung up, but the feeling of unease lingered, gnawing at her. She glanced toward the street, expecting to see Ethan's car parked nearby, but there was nothing. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that he was closer than she thought. Later that evening, after the kids had gone to bed, Sarah sat alone in the living room, her thoughts racing. The phone call, the way Ethan's voice had trembled, something didn't sit right. She stared at the locked door, every creak of the floorboards amplifying in her mind. Just as she was about to stand and double-check the locks, she heard it. A faint knock on the door. Her breath caught in her throat. She slowly approached the door, peering through the peephole. There was no one there. But then, a rustling sound from the backyard made her freeze. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she cautiously moved toward the sliding door. She had no idea who it could be, but her instincts screamed that it wasn't good. The house was silent except for the soft hum of the refrigerator, but every fiber of her being was alert, waiting for the next move. Just then, a shadow passed by the window. Before Sarah could react, the doorbell rang. It was followed by another knock, this one harder, more insistent. She didn't have to open the door to know who it was. It was Ethan. At this point, everything inside Sarah was telling her to call the police, but she couldn't help herself. She opened the door, just a crack, enough to see Ethan standing there, his face drawn and haggard. His usual confident demeanor was gone, replaced by desperation. "Sarah," he said quietly, "I'm not here to fight. I need to see the kids." "No," Sarah replied firmly. "You've lost that right." Ethan stepped forward, his eyes wild with emotion. "You don't understand. I'm trying to make things right. I can't live like this anymore." His words didn't reach her. Sarah's mind was already racing. She knew this wasn't just a conversation about reconciliation. This was about control, and Ethan was losing it. Before she could slam the door shut, Ethan reached forward, pushing the door open with alarming force. In the moment that Sarah hesitated, his hand was already inside. "Get out!" she screamed, but Ethan didn't budge. His anger flared, and before Sarah knew it, the door was fully open. He stepped inside, his eyes wild, and grabbed her by the arm. Everything slowed down for a moment as Sarah fought to break free from his grip. She yanked her arm back, and with the strength of pure adrenaline, shoved Ethan backward, sending him stumbling into the hallway. "Get out!" she repeated, her voice shaking with fear and rage. Ethan's face contorted with a mix of anger and disbelief. "You think this is it? You think you can just shut me out like this? Like you've been doing all along?" Just as Sarah opened her mouth to respond, the sound of footsteps echoed from upstairs. Maddie and Jake were awake. "No," Sarah said, backing away. "You need to leave. Right now." Ethan didn't move, his chest heaving as he took in Sarah's words. "You've won, Sarah," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You've taken everything from me." Tears welled in his eyes, but Sarah was past caring. "I didn't take anything from you," she snapped. "You threw it all away, and you'll keep throwing it all away unless you leave right now." For a moment, it seemed as if Ethan would refuse to go. But then, slowly, he turned and stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him. The sound of it reverberated in Sarah's ears, making her knees buckle. But the drama didn't end there. The next day, Ethan's behavior escalated. Sarah received a call from her lawyer, informing her that Ethan had filed a motion to challenge the custody agreement. He claimed that she was alienating the children from him and demanded joint custody. Sarah's hands trembled as she held the phone to her ear. "He's what? He's trying to take them back," the lawyer explained. "It's not uncommon in these cases, especially when someone feels cornered. But this could get messy." Sarah's mind raced. She'd been hoping for a clean break, a chance to rebuild her life without the constant tension of Ethan's presence. But now it seemed like he was determined to drag her and the kids back into his turmoil. As the court date approached, the tension in the Parker household became unbearable. Every conversation between Sarah and Ethan was charged with hostility. He would show up at the house, trying to talk to the kids, his false charm unable to mask the bitterness that had taken root inside him. Sarah's only solace was Maddie and Jake, who were adjusting well, despite the chaos. They were strong, stronger than she ever realized. But Sarah knew the stakes were higher than ever now. If Ethan succeeded in getting joint custody, everything would change for them. The stability they'd fought for would crumble. And that's where we'll leave things for now. The tension is building, and we're nearing the climax of this story. If you've been captivated by the twists and turns, make sure to hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. The stakes are rising, and trust me, this section is about to get intense. If you're enjoying the twists, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated on how everything unfolds. Let's dive into the heart of the storm. The battle for custody had reached its boiling point. The tension in Sarah's life had never been higher, and the fear of losing her kids to Ethan's manipulation gnawed at her every moment. Each day felt like a countdown to the court date, each phone call from her lawyer a reminder that the life she was fighting for could slip through her fingers at any moment. Ethan, on the other hand, had grown increasingly desperate. Every move he made felt calculated, like he was playing a game he wasn't prepared to lose. The court documents were filled with accusations that he was a devoted father, that Sarah was the one who had kept him from his kids. It was an image he desperately tried to sell, but Sarah knew the truth. She knew the kind of father he really was. The day of the custody hearing arrived, and Sarah stood outside the courtroom, nerves threatening to overtake her. She had prepared herself for this moment, rehearsing her testimony and the evidence she had gathered. But nothing could prepare her for the emotional weight of standing face to face with Ethan in that cold, sterile room. It was a battle for her children, for their future, and the stakes felt higher than anything she had ever faced. Maddie and Jake were with Sarah's sister, Liz, for the day, safe from the drama about to unfold. Sarah didn't want them to see their parents torn apart in front of a judge, but the fear of losing them, the only family she had left, made it almost impossible to breathe. Her lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Carol, stood beside her, giving her a supportive nod. "We're ready," she said quietly. Sarah nodded, but the weight of the situation still hung heavy on her shoulders. She knew what Ethan was capable of, and the thought of him manipulating the system to take her children was enough to make her stomach churn. The courtroom was packed with tension as both parties entered. Ethan sat with his attorney, his expression one of forced calm, as though he could hide the storm of emotions brewing beneath the surface. He looked every bit the polished businessman, his suit, his demeanor, but there was something in his eyes that betrayed him: guilt, desperation, and the sharp edge of anger. Sarah sat across from him, trying to remain composed. But as she looked at him, her mind raced. Was this the man she had once loved? Or had he become something else entirely? A stranger wrapped in a facade of charm and deceit? The proceedings began, and the judge, a no-nonsense woman with a steely gaze, immediately set the tone. "Let's keep this brief," she said, glancing at both attorneys. "The priority here is the well-being of the children. Let's focus on the facts." Ethan's lawyer was the first to speak. He painted a picture of a father who had been denied access to his children by Sarah. He claimed that Sarah was manipulating the situation to alienate Ethan from his kids, making him out to be the villain when he had only ever wanted to be a good father. Sarah's lawyer, Carol, countered with a detailed timeline of Ethan's behavior. The missed birthdays, the canceled soccer games, the unexplained absences. She presented evidence that Ethan had been more interested in his own selfish desires than in his children's well-being. She spoke about the emotional toll Ethan's actions had taken on Maddie and Jake, citing the psychological evaluations that had been conducted. The judge listened carefully, her expression unreadable as the two sides argued back and forth. But Sarah knew it wasn't just about the facts. It was about the heart of the matter. It was about the children. And that was where she knew she had the advantage. The pivotal moment came when the judge called Sarah to the stand. She stood, her legs trembling, but her voice steady as she spoke. She told the truth, the painful, raw truth about her marriage, about Ethan's affair, about how he had lied and betrayed her, and how his actions had affected their children. She spoke of the late nights, the lies, the broken promises, and how she had always put their family first, even when Ethan had failed them. And yet, despite everything, Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly, I've never stopped believing that Maddie and Jake deserve both their parents. But I also believe they deserve stability. They deserve to be loved, and they deserve to be safe. And right now, with the way Ethan has been acting, I don't think he's the person who can give them that. She could feel Ethan's eyes on her as she spoke, his anger simmering just beneath the surface. But she didn't falter. This wasn't about him anymore. This was about her kids. This was about her family. The turning point came when the judge asked Sarah a simple question. Do you believe Ethan is capable of providing that stability? For a moment, Sarah's mind went blank. She had lived through so much, Ethan's betrayal, his emotional neglect, and now this twisted fight for control. But the answer was clear. It wasn't just about the custody agreement. It was about Maddie and Jake's future. And for that, Sarah knew what she had to say. No, she said, her voice firm. I don't think he can. The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan's lawyer opened his mouth to speak, but the judge raised her hand, silencing him. Hours later, the judge delivered her verdict. After reviewing all the evidence and hearing both sides of the story, this court has decided that primary custody will be granted to Sarah Parker. Ethan Parker will have supervised visitation rights, and he will be required to attend parenting classes before any further changes to visitation arrangements can be made. The words hit Sarah like a ton of bricks. It was over. She had won. She had fought for her children, for their safety and well-being, and she had won. Ethan's face went pale, his eyes flashing with rage as he stood up to leave. This isn't over, he hissed under his breath, but Sarah didn't respond. She didn't need to. The court had spoken, and Ethan's manipulations would no longer hold any power over her. As Sarah walked out of the courtroom, the weight she had carried for so long began to lift. The battle wasn't over. It never would be, as long as Ethan was still in their lives. But this victory meant something. It meant that her children would have a chance at a stable, happy future. It meant that she could finally move forward. Maddie and Jake were waiting for her outside the courtroom, their faces lighting up when they saw her. Sarah bent down to hug them, feeling the warmth of their small arms around her. We won, Mom, Maddie said, her voice full of relief. We did, Sarah replied, holding her kids close. We're going to be okay. And for the first time in months, Sarah believed it. That's it for now. If you're still with me, don't forget to hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Story Corner for the final chapter of this incredible journey. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. And here we are, folks, at the final chapter of this roller coaster ride. If you've stuck with me this far, thank you. If you haven't yet, now's the time to hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Story Corner so you don't miss any of the future twists and turns we've got coming. Now let's wrap this up. After the court ruling, life didn't return to normal overnight. But the heavy cloud that had been hanging over Sarah, Maddie, and Jake finally began to lift. The truth had come out, and Ethan's ability to manipulate them was no longer a looming threat. For the first time in a long time, Sarah felt like she had control over her life again. She was the one steering the ship now. No more evasive answers, no more broken promises, just the reality of their new beginning. The first few weeks after the custody battle were full of adjustments. Maddie, who had always been the most perceptive, asked questions about the court process. Will Dad still be able to come to my soccer games? She asked one night, her voice hesitant. Sarah nodded, though she could see the sadness in her daughter's eyes. Yes, sweetie. He'll still come when he can, but we have to be careful. He has some things to work through before we can trust him again. Maddie seemed to take this in stride, though Sarah noticed her lingering uncertainty. There was no quick fix for the emotional toll this had all taken on her children. But Sarah was determined to help them navigate this new chapter with as much love and stability as she could give. Jake, on the other hand, had a simpler view of things. He was young enough to let go of the pain relatively easily, though he still had his moments of confusion. Why did Daddy stop living with us? He asked one day, looking up at Sarah as they sat on the couch together. Sarah wrapped her arms around him, Sometimes grown-ups don't get along, baby. It doesn't mean you or Maddie did anything wrong. It just means that things between me and Daddy changed. But you'll always have both of us. Okay? Jake nodded, curling into her arms. The unconditional love she had for her kids was her anchor now. They were going to be okay. They had to be. As for Ethan, the fallout from the custody battle hit him hard. The humiliation of losing in court, combined with the growing realization that he had lost the respect of his children, took its toll on him. His attempts to reach out to Sarah were met with resistance, and slowly, he seemed to fade from the picture. But it wasn't over. Ethan's lawyer reached out one last time, offering a settlement to finalize the divorce. Ethan wanted to avoid further public embarrassment, knowing that any more court battles would only expose him further. Sarah agreed, knowing that the finality of this decision would give her the peace she so desperately needed. In the months that followed, Sarah continued to focus on herself and her children. Her personal growth was evident. No longer the woman who had silently endured Ethan's neglect and betrayal, Sarah had become someone stronger, someone who was capable of standing up for herself, who had found her voice in the midst of chaos. She realized that she was enough. She didn't need Ethan's approval or validation. She was whole on her own, and slowly she started to rebuild. She had to take baby steps. She returned to her freelance work with renewed vigor, taking on projects she had once been too scared to attempt. She began to make time for herself again. Long walks, reading, catching up with friends. These small acts of self-care became lifelines, reminding her that she was worthy of love, not just from her children, but from herself too. Maddie continued to excel at soccer, finding strength in the game as she always had. Jake, growing more confident, took an interest in art, spending afternoons drawing and sketching at the kitchen table. It was in these moments, as they all adjusted to their new normal, that Sarah realized something. Her family wasn't broken. It was just different. It was late one evening, a few months after the divorce, when Sarah found herself standing at the front door, looking out at the calm street. The world outside had moved on, and so had she. The echo of Ethan's presence had faded, replaced by the quiet hum of a home that had once again found its rhythm. There was no more tension in the air, no more waiting for the next bombshell to drop. There was only peace. She turned as Maddie and Jake came bounding down the stairs, each holding a bag of popcorn. "We ready for movie night?" Jake asked, his voice filled with excitement. "We are," Sarah replied, smiling as she watched them settle on the couch. The love they shared, the comfort of their togetherness, was the foundation that would carry them forward. As Sarah sat down between her children, she knew that the future was uncertain. But for the first time in years, she felt ready to face whatever came next. Because no matter what, she had the strength to protect her family, and that was all that mattered. And so, as the credits rolled on their movie night, Sarah found herself reflecting on the journey. She had learned more about herself than she had ever expected. She had discovered her own resilience, her ability to fight for what truly mattered, and her strength to move forward. Most importantly, she had learned that sometimes, letting go of the past was the only way to embrace the future. The emotional roller coaster of the past year had taken its toll, but it had also reshaped her into someone who would never settle for less than she deserved. She was a mother, a woman, and someone who had finally learned to trust herself again. And in the quiet of the living room, with her children by her side, Sarah knew one thing for certain. She was going to be okay. That's it for now, folks. If you've stuck with me through this entire story, I can't thank you enough. It's been an emotional ride, but the journey of Sarah and her kids is a testament to resilience, strength, and love. If you haven't already, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories. There's plenty more to come, and you won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.